Welcome everyone to DTSC's Summer Quarterly Public Meeting for 2018. We're very happy to have all of you here in the room and everyone who is participating online and through Facebook Live. We have some really interesting presentations to share with you today. I look forward to the conversation that we're going to have. We have presentations on some grant programs that are available from DTSC in our cleanup program. We also have a presentation, an update on some of the work that's being done in our Safer Consumer Products program, some work by our Environmental Chemistry Lab, and also some award-winning work that our Information Technology Group has done, our Office of Environmental Information Management. They got some awards for some of their work, and we are really excited to share that with you. I have some of my executive team with me here on the dais, Ms. Ana Mascareñas, who is our Assistant Director for Environmental Justice and Tribal Affairs, Ms. Francesca Negri, our Chief Deputy Director, Geraldine Lopez Mendoza, who is our Deputy Director for Public Participation, Mr. Bruce LaBelle from our Environmental Chemistry Lab, Mr. Mohsen Nazemi, who is the Deputy Director of our Cleanup Program, and finally Ms. Dr. Meredith Williams, who is the Deputy Director for our Safer Products and Workplaces Program. In addition, in the audience, Amelia Glickman, our Chief Counsel, and Rizgar Ghazi, Deputy Director for the Hazardous Waste Management Program. There are other members of our team in the audience as well, and I believe we'll be able to answer questions and provide information to provide a robust and interesting dialogue with you today. Thank you again so much for joining us. I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Geraldine Lopez Mendoza for a few announcements now. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Again, thank you all for joining us today. Just some logistics to take care of. Please put your cell phones on silence or vibrate. Also, if you need restrooms or water fountains and you're here visiting us in person, they can be found on the north side of the lobby. So go out these doors, make a left, and then the security guards will help you find the way. In the event of fire or evacuation, use the nearest safe exit. There are 4 exits along the west side of the room. You can see them. They're labeled with red signs. There's also one in the back of the room, in the north part of the room. If you exit through the west, turn left and exit the building, then left again and be in the parking lot. If you exit to the north, turn right and exit the lobby. But if you are evacuated, if for some reason that happens, please don't leave the property until we've had an opportunity to account for you. In addition, I wanted just to remind everyone, as with our first quarterly public meeting, all verbal in-person comments will be limited to 3 minutes. If participants are engaging by webcast, your public comments submitted remotely will also be limited to 3 minutes. We'll read them into the record until 3 minutes are up. If you do want to participate remotely, you can send email to DTSC public meeting, no spaces, dashes, or dots, at dtsc.ca.gov. Again, it's DTSC public meeting at dtsc.ca.gov. And that email box will be monitored constantly. So if there are questions, we'll be sure to raise them. Finally, for folks who are here in person, we do have simultaneous Spanish language translation available. So if you could make that announcement in Spanish, please.
Buenas tardes. Para aquellos que deseen o necesiten el audio en español, tenemos audífonos aquí en la mesa con el cubículo en la entrada del salón. Gracias.
Muchas gracias. So if anyone needs that service, obviously it's available. So having housekeeping taken care of and introductions made, we do have one more introduction to add. Christy Bautista, who is a special assistant for special projects. She's also joined us. So Christy, thank you for being here today. So we want to get it kicked off with our first substantive presentation by Mohsen Nazemi, who who is the Deputy Director of Site Mitigation and Restoration, and he'll be doing a presentation on the available financial assistance for site investigation and remediation. Mohsen.
Thank you, Geraldine. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to DTSC's quarterly public meeting. My name is Mohsen Nazemi. As you heard, I'm a Deputy Director for our Site Mitigation and Restoration Program. I think it's important to remind that DTSC's mission is to protect public health and the environment in California. And there are three core programs that DTSC uses to accomplish these, and one of them is the Hazardous Waste Management Program, which Riz Gargazi is the acting deputy, and that permits, does enforcement and criminal investigation of hazardous waste facilities. The other one, which you will hear from Dr. Williams later on today, is our Safer Consumer Products Program. And then the third one is the program that I'm in charge of, and that's one of the ways that we accomplish protection of public health and environment through Site Mitigation and Restoration Program. There are tens of thousands of contaminated sites in the state of California, and each year DTSC works on about 1,700 active cleanup sites. And one of the elements that is greatly impacting the cleanup of a site is funding. And therefore, purpose of today's presentation that I'm providing is to provide information on DTSC's available financial assistance for investigation and remediation of contaminated sites. There are two programs that I will talk about. The first one, the Targeted Site Investigation Program, is to assist the investigation and assessment of various contaminated sites. And this program offers grants to applicants, and the deadline for applying for this next fiscal years is July 13. And I'll give you more details about that. The second program is the Brownfields Revolving Loan Fund, or RLF program, which provides both loans and grants for assistance in the cleanup and remediation of the sites. And the application for this program is year-round. Both of these programs are funded through the federal U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, but the actual funding is through DTSC. So let me start with the Targeted Site Investigation. This again is to assist in assessment and investigation and planning of contaminated sites. There's an annual application, competitive application process that we go through. The funding is not directly to the applicant, but DTSC hires contractors that will do the work for the applicant. And the grants range from $30,000 to $85,000 per site. Some of the examples of the sites that were used in the last fiscal year were the low-income housing development on vacant land. It was for vacant and blighted former redevelopment agency property, and reuse of two former lumber yards. And overall, each fiscal year, we put out about $300,000 to $400,000 grant for this program. The eligibility requirements for the TSI grant is that the redevelopment must be in the planning stage or in progress. So some work needs to have been done with it. And the ownership is not needed, although we do need a permission to access the site from the owner. And it doesn't have to be a formal legal document. It could be just a letter from the owner. But we also have to have access for sampling at the site. So if the site is occupied by a tenant or a resident, we need to have access to be able to go out and sample the site. And the project scope should be completed within 1 year of the application of the grants. There are some restrictions or limitations for the TSI grant, and it does not apply to federally owned properties or state-owned properties. It is not to be used for ongoing or planned work if U.S. Environmental Protection Agency has directed removal action under an order. Also, it can't be for a site that's already listed on national priority list. Those are Superfund sites throughout the state of California, and there should not be any current enforcement action being taken against the site. These are the two websites that has information on the application and on the guidelines for applying for these. Some of the criteria that we use, for example, to analyze eligibility is that the project area has a clear need for revitalization and that there is municipal or community support for that. There's adequate resources for high developer interest, and also assessment and assistance from DTSC is crucial in order to get that site completed. Here's a schedule of the timing. As I mentioned earlier, the July 13 is the deadline for applying for next fiscal year. And then once an application is submitted and all the applications are evaluated, we contact the applicant to verify some information or get additional information. And then by August, decision notices are sent out to the applicants to let them know whether or not their application was approved for this grant. And if so, then by September, the actual work should be initiated. And as I mentioned, the work needs to be completed within the fiscal year. So by May timeframe, the work needs to be completed. However, our TSI grant is a complete, if additional assessment is needed, then we contact US EPA and determine if they have additional funding so we don't leave the project proponent alone and trying to figure out what to do next. If cleanup planning is needed, we actually can, depending on the timing, we encourage a reapplication for this grant for the next fiscal year. And if actual cleanup is needed, then we refer the applicant to our next program that I will speak about, the Revolving Loan Fund. These are the two contact people for our TSI grant. Tris Chesney is the TSI coordinator, and Mariam Tasnif-Abbasi is the Brownfields coordinator. And I just want to give you an example. This picture is for a site that we worked with Habitat for Humanity in East Bay, Silicon Valley area. It was a grant that provided approximately $30,000 to prepare a cleanup plan and a phase 1 report. The property transfer, there was about an acre site that will be used for affordable homes, and DTSC is actually working with Habitat for Humanity to apply for assistance under our revolving loan fund for the cleanup of this site. The next program that I want to talk about is the Brownfields Revolving Loan Fund, which is to facilitate the reuse and redevelopment of the site by providing low-cost financing to the applicants and allow the cleanup for both public and privately held properties. The DTSC's program has funded about a little less than $10 million over the last 12 years under this program, with 20% state match for each year. The program started in 2006. To date, we have obligated more than $5 million in 6 loans, and about $5.5 million in 23 sub-grants. And it's called revolving because the repayment of the loan and then becomes available subsequent loans. So it just kind of goes around and around. And the locations of the sites that have been provided grants under this program and loans are all over the state of California, in the Sacramento area, in the Bay Area, and the Southern California area. The eligibility requirements for this is that the funds can only be used for remediation work. It could be a hazardous substance contamination or a petroleum, hydrocarbon, or both that could apply for this. Public or private entities are eligible for the loan. Ownership is not required. However, if the grant is needed, public agencies and nonprofit property owners can apply for the grant up to $200,000, and no repayment is required for those grants. The requirement for this site, for this loan, is also that there must be an approved cleanup plan in place so that it can quickly move into the cleanup stage. Some of the other eligibility requirements or limitations are that must not be, the applicant cannot be a responsible party for the contamination. Again, no state or federally owned properties can apply for the grant and for the loan, and then no ongoing US EPA direct removal action order should be in place. Site cannot be a Superfund site under National Priority List, nor can be under a current enforcement action. Some of the criteria for the loan program is that it's an ongoing year-round application process, so there is no deadline. You can apply for it any time. There will be a credit rating check and collateral check. Loan amounts are flexible up to 5 years at 3% current interest rate, and there is a $500 loan application fee that is non-refundable, and there's a 1.5% origination fee on the loan. Let's look at, again, the two individuals who are in charge of this program. Jennifer Black is the RLF program manager, who is actually here in this room, and Miriam is the Brownfields coordinator. And just the picture that we used here is actually from a San Francisco Mission Bay Park. The Mission Bay have received 5 sub-grants for a total of $1 million for 5 different parks. It's a part of a 41-acre network of park planned for Mission Bay, and helped replace 300 acres of former rail yards and surface parking lots with transit-oriented urban neighborhoods, so that the community can utilize this. And the project has employed roughly 1,000 people annually, and since the conception of this program, over 10,000 employment has been appropriated for this project. Finally, I want to also direct you to a website under California Environmental Protection Agency, where there are additional loans and funds and grants available from Cal EPA directly, from Air Resources Board, and from State Water Resources Control Board. Some of these may not apply to actual site investigation or remediation, but the Water Board also has some loans and grants that could apply for a site cleanup. And that concludes my presentation, and I'll be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mohsen. That was very, very informative. I actually personally found the pictures be very illuminating. So thank you for sharing that. Do we have any questions here in the room from folks who are attending in person? We have people available with microphones. If you have a question, you could just raise your hand. Okay, great. Marcus, have we received any questions via email?
No, Geraldine, not at this time.
So I'll just remind everyone who is participating remotely that if you do have any questions or comments on our presentations, you can submit them at DTSC public meeting at dtsc.ca.gov. So unless anyone wants to raise their hand at the last minute and ask a question. Mohsen, thank you very much for your presentation. The other thing I wanted to remind everyone is that here in the room, we have hard copies of the presentation in English and in Spanish. All of the materials that will be presented today on the screen, in case you didn't catch one of the websites, will all be on our webpage as it relates to our public meetings. We also have a number of written updates that will be available to you, that are available to you, relating to rulemaking, permits and site mitigation locations that are out for public comments, Enforcement and Emergency Response Division settlement summaries, if you're interested in that, resolution of enforcement actions, and all of that will be available in English and Spanish on our webpage on an ongoing basis. So if for some reason you're watching this after the meeting's over and you have questions, all the information will be available to you on our webpage. That webpage address is dtsc.ca.gov/ /getinvolved/public meetings, plural, /index. So you should be able to get to it by then, and I'll remind you again of that address before we conclude. So next we have a presentation by Meredith Williams, Ph.D., Deputy Director of our Safer Products and Workplaces Program, on recent developments in the implementation of safer consumer product regulations. Meredith?
Thank you, Geraldine. And thank you for the opportunity to talk today and to bring people up to speed on what's been happening with the Safer Consumer Products Program. Mohsen gave a nice mention of the 3 core programs we have at DTSC, and Safer Consumer Products is the smallest of those 3 programs, and we're implementing the newest set of regulations, framework regulations. Safer Consumer Products nicely complements our site mitigation and restoration program and our hazardous waste management program, in that it tries to address some of the problems that those programs have to deal with. So for instance, it's trying to prevent releases of chemicals before they even get out into the environment. And we're trying to avoid having to even transport and handle hazardous materials by asking manufacturers to look for safer materials. So it's 2008. The Safer Consumer Products regulations actually went into effect to enact the green chemistry laws that were passed 10 years ago. Not quite 10 years ago. In the fall, it'll be 10 years, but it's a good time to take a step back and reflect. The framework was put in place to change the incentives for manufacturers, to try to get them to find those safer alternatives and to shift the burden to some degree, rather than a government entity having to make decisions about what's hazardous. It places more information on the manufacturers to think about what's safe. Do we really need this chemical in the product in order for it to meet the requirements of the product? And that's a very big shift. And there are a number of key tenets that went into these regulations. Again, the manufacturer is very responsible. However, they have a lot of flexibility as to how they can respond to our interest in a particular product. One of the things this set of regulations is really designed to do is to stop the cycle of getting rid of one hazardous chemical and then replacing it with another chemical that might have similar harm or have different possible toxicological or other hazards associated with it. And so the framework is designed to avoid that cycle of what we call regrettable substitutes. It's enforceable. Many of you are familiar with the pollution prevention work that was done by the department for many, many years. Very good work. However, a lot of that work didn't have teeth. There was no way to, once a solution was found, there was no way to compel the manufacturers to adopt a safer technology. And in this case, we have some teeth in the program, and so the enforceability is there. As I said, it's intended to incentivize the search for safer alternatives. And then lastly, just like the other core programs in the department, this program is built on transparency, stakeholder engagement, and of course, sound science. So as I said, we're not quite 10 years old, but I thought we would celebrate a little bit early today and take a little time to think about what it means to be 10 years old. Now, when the law was passed, we were barely a twinkle in the legislature's eye, this program. Really, it took a long time to gestate the actual set of regulations that we're working under. But it happened in 2013, late 2013, and then the program was able to take its initial steps, and as a toddler does, sometimes we may stumble a little bit and maybe not get everything perfectly, but we certainly are learning every step of the way. And then we had a whole series of firsts, a lot of firsts, that some of which I'll talk about today. But now we're 10, or almost 10, and 10-year-olds, I think, are 9 and 10-year-olds, I think they're just about the most fun age with children. I'm very biased about that. I don't know. I actually was a sports camp counselor to 9 and 10-year-olds, and so I think that's where my bias comes from. But they crack me up because they constantly surprised me with how much they knew. They would know things and I would say, how can you possibly know that? But they're sponges and they're picking things up and learning very rapidly. They're not fully grown, but they do have a pretty good skill set in their, starting to form. And that allows them to take on new challenges and to really stretch themselves. And I think those are apt descriptions of where we are in terms of our implementation of safer consumer products. So just as a reminder, the 4 steps of the regulations are shown here. The first step being to identify the chemicals that we care about that may pose some potential hazard. And we do that with our candidate chemicals list. We then take those chemicals and associate them with individual products. And if we think there's a possible harm from that product, we go through a public process to share our technical basis for that concern. We get some public comment, and then we go through a rulemaking process to actually list a product chemical combination as a priority product. If we do that, that triggers that manufacturer responsibility that I was talking about. The manufacturers at that point are required to go ahead, look for safer alternatives, evaluate the pros and cons and trade-offs associated with any of the alternatives they identify, and select an alternative, tell us what that alternative might be, and then that becomes the basis for us to issue a regulatory response, which could be, go forth, that's great, we think that's a great alternative, or it could be, it needs more study. We have quite a lot of flexibility in our regulatory responses. So, as I said, we've done a lot of firsts in the program, and one of the things we did was that we issued a 3-year work plan, our first 3-year work plan, 2015 to 2017, and actually that has just expired, and we have now issued our second 3-year priority product work plan. And the work plan identifies the product categories that we care about and that we're going to research and investigate to identify those priority products. As I said, it's the second work plan, and it looks somewhat similar to our first work plan. However, there have been a few little tweaks here and there. We're still concerned about children, about the fact that when they're exposed to chemicals and they're in that developmental stage, they can be more successful to certain exposures. We've taken some actions to protect workers. We'll continue to look at worker safety that's related to chemical exposures. And of course, as California learned during the drought, our water is precious. It's precious to us, and you're starting to see more use of recycled water and different uses of water, and it's also very important to aquatic species around the state. And we'll continue to consider those possible harmful effects from chemicals on our aquatic resources. I just kept clicking, didn't I? And then lastly, because we're stuck indoors so much of the time, we're going to continue to look at chemicals in the indoor environment. And new to our work plan, this 3-year work plan, is the food packaging category, which comes out of our concern about chemicals that can get out of the food packaging and into our food, which is a pretty great way to get exposed to chemicals. So as I mentioned, the firsts, I don't think I should be trusted with this. We did name 3 products initially when we started up the program, and those are now in different stages of the regulatory process. We have adopted 2 priority products in regulation, the first one being the children's foam padded sleeping products like nap mats and pillows and crib liners that contain 2 of the flame retardants, and that regulation became effective last year. The second one is our spray polyurethane foam with methylene diphenyl diisocyanate. That chemical is an asthmagen. It can cause asthma in people who are exposed to it, and so we have some concerns there. That regulation has been adopted, but it won't be effective until July 1st, so that's coming up very soon, and then the manufacturers will start to look for those safer alternatives. And then thirdly, we have methylene chloride. Methylene chloride is used as a paint stripper. It's a carcinogen and a neurotoxicant. sadly, it's been responsible for a number of fatalities, both around the country and in California. And so it continues to be there's a lot of cause for concern with that, and we are completing our rulemaking on that particular product. But those were our firsts. We're moving on. In 2018, we've proposed 2 new priority products so far. We've proposed carpets that contain perfluoroalkyl substances or polyfluoroalkyl substances. Those are things like Teflon or things like you might find in a Gore-Tex jacket, and that's because the same properties that make them so wonderful in terms of non-stick properties also make them very persistent. And so when they do have harmful effects like immune system effects, for instance, or developmental effects, there's a lot of cause for concern because those chemicals stick around for a very long time. We're also looking at laundry detergents with nonylphenol ethoxylates. Don't run out and throw out all your laundry detergents at home, because most of our laundry detergents that we buy on the retail shelves don't have this chemical, because the retail market has found other solutions. But a lot of the commercial products still use these surfactants to make their laundry detergents effective, and they're harmful to aquatic life. So we are in the process of proposing that. Our comment period on that, you still have a few hours. It closes today on our technical document. Beyond that, we're still doing research on in a number of other areas. We are researching quite a breadth of nail salon products, and those products contain a number of different candidate chemicals. And so we're trying to identify which of those combinations of product and chemical we're most concerned about. We recently received our second petition, actually, that was not our first, which was for zinc in tires. The California Stormwater Quality Association asked us to consider listing zinc in tires as a priority product. Again, it's one of these chemicals that's toxic to aquatic life, and in Southern California, there's been a lot of concern in particular about impairments of water bodies and the fact that it would be so hard to clean this up out of storm water. And so CASCA has asked us to look at that. And then lastly, as with the rest of the department, there's a lot of concern about lead acid batteries. What can we do differently? What's the best course of action? And we are considering whether or not we should be listing lead acid batteries as a priority product, and staff has done extensive research on that question. Throughout all of those decisions, we've had a lot of public engagement. We're very, very grateful for that. We've had engagement from non-governmental organizations. There are groups that are concerned about worker safety that have reached out to us and stayed engaged in our actions. Cancer prevention groups have commented on some of our decisions, and environmental protection agencies or organizations have also plugged in. Quite a wide variety of stakeholders from the nonprofit world have been engaged. The regulations were put together with a pretty extensive conversation with industry. Industry was in partnership with the nonprofit community when the regulations were formed, and they have stayed engaged with us, and we're very appreciative of that. They have commented on our documents. When we have proposed a priority product, they've come forth and shared information. We rely on that, and we will continue to rely on that, and we're very appreciative of all of that. The academic community has provided us with information, monitoring results, new studies about toxicology, and so we stay very engaged with them. We also have our Green Ribbon Science panel, and there are a number of academics on that panel who advise us on the work that we're doing. And lastly, we have individual consumers who've come forth to weigh in on some of our decisions. I will mention methylene chloride specifically, where some of the families who lost loved ones reached out to us and said how important they thought our action was. And I think that illustrates how important consumers are and individual Californians, and so we do hope to see more and more engagement with those folks. If we throw a 10th birthday party, will have, oh, no, sorry. You can tell that by now, as we get to this 10-year-old milestone, we've really been able to take some actions. We've taken some worker protection measures. We're looking out for kids. We're trying to address asthma. We're looking at water quality, both for drinking and wildlife. And so you can start to see the power of this set of regulations. And I think that as things go on, you'll start to see more and more of that. If we do throw a 10th birthday party, we won't be alone. The actions we're taking are not done in isolation in any way. There's actually a pretty significant movement toward greener chemistries and safer products on a number of fronts, whether that's Walmart identifying the chemicals that won't be in products on their shelves and working with their supply chain to get those out, whether that's the clothing industry, which has a zero discharge of hazardous chemicals initiative to get rid of some of the harmful chemicals that are used in dyes and fabric treatments. There's a very big movement to put pressure on retailers and through the Mind the Store campaign, and that's having some effect. And some retailers, like IKEA, have taken measures on their own. They've eliminated, for instance, the perfluorinated chemicals throughout their product lines. And of course, government has a role to play. Governor Brown signed the Cleaning Products Right to Know Act just last year, and that will start to get more information about what chemicals are in products starting in 2020. We've had some back and forth with the European Union under their authorities, and we stay engaged with the US EPA about toxics. And so we have company in this journey that we're trying to make. So we're going to turn 10, and we're going to then, of course, look forward to the next milestone. And I recently had occasion to go to a graduation. If you're wondering, those of you who know Carl Palmer, that's his daughter who recently graduated. So I noticed some of the common themes in graduation speeches. The graduation speech I heard, and Geraldine heard, she was at the same event, was very unique, but there are some common things that graduates hear, and those are that you should take the skills you learn and go out into the world and try to have the biggest impact you can and try to do good. And we think we're well positioned for those very things. I think they're apt for where we are in this program, and hopefully we'll start to see even more of an impact as we move forward. So thank you for your time and attention, and I'm happy to answer any questions either now or should you want to reach out to me, there's my information. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Williams. It was an excellent presentation, especially the history and the 10-year-old that your program is becoming. Does anyone in the audience here in person have any questions for Dr. Williams? Not even where Carl Palmer's daughter graduated from? I actually was wondering.
San Luis Obispo.
Oh, there
Cal
it is.
Poly.
Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. That was my question. Marcus, were there any questions that came to us from the email?
None at this time.
None at this time. Okay. Were there any questions on Mohsen Nazemi's presentation?
No, none at this time.
Thank you. So if nobody has any curveball questions for Dr. Williams, thank you so much for your presentation. I really appreciated it. Just a reminder, all the information we're presenting today is available at the back of the room in hard copy in English and Spanish, and it will be available on our public meeting webpage if it's not already, dtsc.ca.gov/getinvolved/public meetings/index.cfm. But that's also listed on our agenda. So if you need to find any of the materials we're discussing today or any of the materials we discussed at our last public meeting in March, please feel free to look on that site and use it as a reference guide. Now we'll be moving into the laboratory with Dr. Bruce LaBelle, who is the chief of our environmental chemistry laboratory and will give us an environmental chemistry lab overview.
Hi, I'm Bruce LaBelle. So I'm organic chemist by training, and I'm head of our Environmental Chemistry Lab. It's often referred to as ECL. And we provide the chemistry expertise for our department. So we're the chemical experts, and as such, we support the programs that anything to do with chemistry, and I'll talk a little more about that. We also have a leadership role because as the chemical experts, we want to know what's coming down the pike, essentially what may be of interest 1, 3, 5, even 10 years ahead, so we can make sure the department will be prepared. Rather than we don't just wait for work to come in, we have that other role to be anticipatory. And that's a critical role, and you'll learn more about that, both now and hopefully in some future workshops, future quarterly meetings. As the chemistry experts, we serve as the reference lab for the hazardous waste testing chemicals, as well as for other toxic chemicals that we test, a wide range of them. So we have this reference lab function, and as such, our big focus is on high-quality data. So we are willing to take the extra time to do what it takes to get the high-quality data. It means we won't be as fast, perhaps, as some other lab, but that's not our focus. There's a role for that, but ours is really on focusing on it being a reference lab, high-quality work. We have 3 programs within the laboratory, an analytical chemistry support branch, and that analytical chemistry branch, I'll tell you more about that, and that's what I'll focus on for this talk. And I hope in future quarterly meetings I can tell you more about the other 2 programs within our lab. One of them is quality assurance and technical support. That program really focuses on helping the other parts of the department, the core programs, with reviewing and understanding and advising them on the chemistry-related aspects of their project planning documents, like their waste analysis plans, quality assurance project plans, sample analysis plans, as well as when they receive data from third parties, helping them understand the quality of that data. We don't do the interpretation, policy interpretation, or programmatic interpretation. We just help understand, are these data usable for a specific purpose, for data of the quality. The other program is the biomonitoring and environmental monitoring program. And that program is a lot of anticipatory work. They do biomonitoring, which is really the ultimate test of exposure. If you biomonitor and you find something in people or wildlife or in pets or other biota, you know there's an exposure pathway. The other thing they do is they look for exposure pathways. How does something get from a product or a waste into the environment and then into a person or wildlife, for example? So, and those, again, I'd like to be able to cover hopefully in future meetings. And some of that work, for example, is with flame retardants and with the perfluoro or polyfluoroalkyl substances, the PFAS, that Meredith's program is working on right now. So we've had experience in those for over a decade, or 2 decades in the case of the flame retardants. And we continually look ahead both to support her program and to be looking ahead at other things. The key to our laboratory is really our people. Between our 2 laboratories in Berkeley and Pasadena, we have a total of about 50 state employees, state staff. Of those scientists, those are all scientists, and 48% have doctorates, and another 14% have master's degrees. So we have a highly skilled, highly educated number of scientists that can do very creative work. We also have, alongside them, we house often up to 10 visiting scholars. These are postdoctoral researchers or visiting professors who are funded by their institution or through grants, who can work in the laboratory alongside our staff on specific projects, grant-funded projects that are of mutual interest. So that adds to our firepower. They provide us with their expertise, and they learn from us and go back to their institutions. So that is a win-win, we find. Now, I'll focus on our analytical support or analytical chemistry branch, who does a lot of work for our cleanup program and our hazardous waste management program. They test some traditional items, soil and water, for example, PCBs in soil, metals in soil or water. We also test some more unusual matrices. Soil and water, EPA methods are designed for soil and water. And we use standard EPA methods, or internal SOPs, standard operating procedures, are based upon those federal methods. However, since those methods are designed for soil and water, we often have work that involves other things. How do you determine what the average lead concentration is in a circuit board or in an entire television set? That's not something that you have a standard method for getting that lead out of that television set and determining the average. So for things like that, and we've worked with our Office of Criminal Investigators, for example, on a number of projects with electronic waste, we have to actually work with careful on methods development, ensuring it's going to be legally defensible, and then validating that. We have 2 laboratories. We can actually do interlaboratory validation between our 2 labs to ensure we get the true values. So a lot of what we do in that is the upfront work of getting the method correct before we start working on a project. We also do work on consumer products, and again, unusual and not the standard things. The rubber duck, we actually did the surgery on it to test for phthalates and lead in children's toys for a project. So again, an unusual project, and one that most laboratories would not be willing to take on or able to take on. One example of a project was there's a law, the Toxics in Packaging Prevention Act, that regulates packaging. There's metals in packaging. And so it has certain limits and on how much of these, like for example, lead you can have. So we weren't interested in the contents, what the packaging for those bottle is the bottle. So we were asked to determine what is the lead content in that glass. Because if the glass came from overseas and had been used in, for example, old TV glass, which is leaded glass, and then when it was used for this, it might have elevated levels of lead. So things like that are types of projects we've asked to do. Another one is lead in plumbing fixtures. That again, some of them are pretty simple. It's one component. But if you have a faucet, you can have up to 30 components in it. And we have to test potentially each of those components that may touch the water to determine the lead content. So it can be quite complex. Some are maybe plastic, some metal, different types of metal. And we have to make sure we get the correct results without any interferences. We also do a variety of special projects, waste stream studies, where the hazardous waste management program, when they want to assess or investigate a industry or understand industry better for some waste stream, they sometimes ask us to help evaluate the waste stream. Examples, metal shredder, electronic waste, batteries. We've done a number of other types of things, such as treated wood waste. Well, one example is that metal shredder waste, where metal recycling is it's a big industry in California, very important. And cars are very complex, lots and lots of different things in your car, different materials. When they remove the metal, they're left with metal shredder residue that also contains many different types of plastic, metal, glass, other materials. Well, we help them characterize some of this during a project, and they sent us hundreds of samples, large samples, and since those samples contained multiple components, we had to do, one is a lot of grinding. We had to be very careful sample prep to make sure it was homogeneous. We also had to do multiple analyze the same sample multiple times to look at variability. Are we getting the correct result? So things like this are almost more typical for us than the traditional soil and water, although we certainly do those. And in summary, we actually do a number of different things. Sample analysis, I've talked to you about. Again, it's key. We use standard methods or SOPs based upon standard methods, SW846 methods from US EPA when we can, but we often have to develop our own methods or modify methods to make sure we can get the correct results. And when we can, we work with other laboratories, other entities to validate the methods to ensure, again, both do them correctly, plus help them to understand how to do it so it can be transferred out into the laboratory field, commercial laboratories. And a key thing is that developing the new methods. And again, also special projects. We've done a wide variety of special projects, both in the analytical support program, but also in our biomonitoring, environmental monitoring program, doing a number of different projects. And our analytical chemistry program also does a lot of consultation and support. When a program like OCI, Office of Criminal Investigations, is going to do a complex investigation, they can come to us ahead of time, and we can help them understand what's the best sampling to do to ensure the data, resulting sample analysis and then data will be usable in court. Because everything we do, we don't expect it to have to hold up in court as a reference laboratory. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Thank you, Dr. LaBelle. Does anyone here in person have any questions for Dr. LaBelle in his presentation? because I'm going to throw you a curveball. I was wondering, Dr. LaBelle, if you could speak just a little bit about the recent Toxic Crusaders program that Pasadena had for youth in the laboratory.
Yes, recently the Associated Public Health Laboratories had a national meeting in Pasadena. And as part of that, we were in touch with them, and Dr. Mui Koltanov, the head of our Pasadena lab, she reached out to them, and we actually had it where Associated Public Health Labs could come to the lab and take tours, but we also wanted to have a community aspect to it. So we set up a program where kids from the community could come and actually do a little forensic chemistry. They could try and problem solve in the laboratory to learn some of the excitement of, it's really problem solving, it's creative, and kids love being creative, kids love solving problems. So the Toxic Crusaders was not just taking a tour of the lab, our folks actually prepared some problems for them, some really, they had to be Sherlock Holmes in effect, Toxic Crusaders, and it sounds like, I think it was a good program. We're hoping to expand it and do it in the future for a lot of the kids in the Los Angeles area, because I think it's a very powerful program, and same with the Bay Area for our Berkeley lab.
Thank you, Dr. LaBelle. It was very successful. It got a lot of interest, a lot of students interested in science, and those who already were intrigued by the idea of being in a real lab with real lab coats. It was very exciting. Marcus, did we get any questions on the internet for Dr. LaBelle?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Okay. If nobody else has any questions for Dr. LaBelle, thank you so much for your presentation. One of the things, the pause for applause. I also wanted to let folks know that we will be putting out a Survey Monkey to get your feedback about the meeting, as well as ideas that you might have for things you want to learn about DTSC going into the future. So that Survey Monkey will probably be going out in the next week or so. For anyone who signed up remotely, we also may send it out to different listservs that we have. So if you have ideas of things to improve this meeting or things that you would like to see presented on, we will be seeking that feedback from you as a way to make this meeting more meaningful for you in your day-to-day work or as a resident of the state of California. So now we'll move to our last presentation, which is by Billy Ferguson, who is a solutions manager in our Office of Environmental Information Management, or OEIM. And he's going to be doing a presentation on RevTech 2018. I'm not going to steal your thunder and say what it is, but Billy, thank you for being here.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. Everyone can hear me fine? My name is Billy Ferguson. I am the solutions manager with the Office of Environmental Information Management. My role as a solution manager is to help our organization understand and capitalize on the value that technology can provide to our day-to-day operations. I'm here to present on our award-winning team that came from all of our... Hi. Sorry? It's written. Okay, good. Hello. There we go. Much better. Whew. Did I start over again? No. So yeah, I'm Billy Ferguson, here to present on our award-winning team. This came from a cross-program initiative as a partnership for us to step up and present on some of the successes we had. We participated in Revolutionary Technology Extreme, or RevTech X, 2018, in which we participated in both a booth and a presentation regarding some of the recent successes we had. Technology plays such an important role in our society and the work that we do that it's important for us to engage with other state agencies and tech leaders to help us understand how we can better utilize this technology and how DTSC accomplishes its mission of protecting California's people and the environment from harmful effects from toxic substances. So what is Revolution Technology 2018? Well, RevTech X had over 1,000 people attend from state and local government, as well as technology leaders like Google, Amazon, and IBM. Not only that, it was covered by local media and broadcasted statewide. RevTech X helped create a forum for people, mainly aimed at state and local government, understand the benefits, applications, challenges to adoption of disrupting technology. A lot of people think disruptive technology is things like smartphones and smart cars, where they're really going to have to make us rethink how we do our business and our day-to-day work. And they're oftentimes difficult for us to understand how exactly they're going to disrupt our organization. So forums like these allow us to engage with other technology leaders, help us understand technology like artificial intelligence, bots, machine learning and robotics, have a discussion with those technology leaders about the value that they can provide to us, as well as discuss with other state agencies about the successes they've had, the struggles they have, and hopefully we can learn from each other on how best to adopt this into our day-to-day business. So what did we do here? We had an open discussion with other state agencies and tech leaders about the successes and struggles that DTSC had with its adoption to technology. We had a booth that demonstrated some of our day-to-day activities that we did, and that gave context for these other agencies as to how technology may be able to provide us some of that benefit. State agencies, we all have a lot of the same problems and struggles, and it's oftentimes someone else has solved it, or maybe we've solved a problem that another state agency can utilize. So this is a great opportunity for us to collaborate, to share those ideas, and to move both of our organizations forward. Additionally, as we engage with the technology leaders, how can we expect them to build the technology if we don't present to them our challenges to the perspective that state and the unique challenges that state and local government have? And it's really helpful for that. And so we had a lot of great opportunity to engage with a lot of people. We had a presentation there. We presented on how our exploration of how technology could potentially benefit DTSC in a session titled Future Tech, Drones, Dashboards, and Emergency Fire Response, where we highlighted some of our key successes with technology. We presented our recent successes integrating mobile data collection into the Household Hazardous Waste Assessment in the recent 2017-2018 fire response. We presented on how we could use new survey techniques in remote mine settings to increase worker safety and efficiency and improve timely decision making. We also explored the use of unmanned aerial vehicles, or UAVs, to map cleanup sites, to more communicate our progress to stakeholders. Ultimately, the purpose of our presentations were to discuss how technology can be used to be safer, smarter, and more efficient in our day-to-day operations. And in particular, we looked at how we can be more transparent in our communication of our decision-making to stakeholders and to the public. Now, we're not really utilizing some of these technologies like UAVs or unmanned aerial vehicles in our day-to-day operations. However, we are engaged with other state agencies regarding their adoptions, the policies, how to do it safe and smart, and so it's a great opportunity for us to explore those avenues. So what did we get out of this? And it's very important to highlight the internal collaboration and communication that we occur, because this is a cross-program initiative where technology, everyone sees technology a little differently and from a different perspective. So it's an important opportunity to come together and collaborate on that for us to understand it in a different way. We learn from each other's successes, strengths. And one of the neatest things I saw was one of the unique displays by the California Natural Resources Agencies, where they use the use of virtual reality goggles. I had the opportunity to participate in the demonstration where I was able to be put into a virtual reality environment where they had environmental data, population characteristics, as well as some local infrastructure. And that was able to kind of get me thinking about how we can collaborate where people don't have to be in the same geographic area to come together to create an environment to enable a decision so that we can make good and timely decisions in that way. And additionally, one of the great outcomes was after this, we engaged with a lot of state agencies, and there's an identified need to create a platform to discuss the UAVs, the unmanned aerial vehicles. So we were invited and participated in the first CIO drone summit up in Folsom. So one of the, I forgot the most important part, excuse me. One of the highlights that we had here was we were nominated for the Most Innovative Team Award, and this was the award right here. And we were nominated not because we were using the most innovative technology, but because we were innovating our process with technology, and we're making large steps towards that. I think this highlights the hard work that a group of people has come together to try to help us understand how we can take steps forward in this. And while we're a ways away from adopting a lot of these advanced technologies, it's these kind of forums that allow us to discuss, understand where technology is going in the future, and seeing how we might be able to get there. This award that we received is kind of an encouragement to our organization that we're going down the right path. We will continue to use technology to challenge the way we do business, so we can be smarter, safer, and more efficient in our work to protect California's people from the environment from harmful chemicals. So thank you very much. And if there are any questions.
Great. Thank you. And I'm so excited we got a cool award. Where is it going to live?
I think at headquarters.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
So we can look at it every day. Does anyone here in the audience who's present in person have any questions for Billy Ferguson, our solutions manager? Somebody's hiding behind their, okay. Marcus, did we get any questions relating to Billy's presentation?
No, none related to Billy's presentation. However, a few short minutes ago, we got one email comment related to today's first presentation.
Okay, so from Mohsen.
Yeah.
So let's wrap up. If nobody has any further any questions from Billy's presentation, thank you so much for being here, and thanks for bringing the award. That's very cool. So Mohsen, looks like you're on the spot. Marcus, you're going to read that question into the record?
Actually, Gina is going to read it into the record so that folks on webcast can hear it, but it comes from Ingrid Rostrom, Assistant Director at the Center on Race, Poverty, and the Environment.
Thank you.
It says, the resources you provided are focused on private developers and public entities. What resources are available for communities and community groups which seek assistance with site investigation and remediation, especially given the financial shortfalls and delays in site cleanups? Has the department considered grants or other assistance to ensure residents that they are safe from exposure from potentially contaminated sites? Secondly, what is DTSC doing to incentivize and encourage better technology for site remediation?
Thank you for, this is Mohsen Nazemi. Thank you for the question. And that's a very good question because as Ingrid knows very well, DTSC has gone in front of the legislature and has presented a structural deficit in our funding program for particularly being able to investigate and conduct cleanup of what we call orphan sites, which are contaminated sites within the state of California that there are no responsible parties, or the responsible party is not available due to whatever bankruptcy or other measures that has taken place. And we are actively looking for funding sources to allow us to help to investigate and clean up the several hundreds of contaminated sites that I discussed during my presentation. As far as what DTSC is doing, we are pursuing responsible parties vigorously in many cases to make sure that they are held responsible for the cleanup. And if there are sites where there is imminent and substantial endangerment of the community members, we actually issue orders to the responsible party or take an emergency action on our within our existing funding to address the contamination for those sites. I also left in my last slide a website that provides some grants to environmental justice programs within the Cal EPA that can provide some assistance for community groups to address some of these aspects. And I think the second question was relevant to the technology, and we have created, and Anna may be able to address that as part of our comments, a dialogue with the community members relative to contaminated soil and alternatives, technologies that could be used for mitigating and remediating contaminated soil sites in addition to or in lieu of excavation and transport or capping of the contamination on site. And those technology assessments are continuously taking place. And at some of our sites, we actually are looking at whether or not some of those are applicable. They're not applicable in all cases, but in some cases, we are looking at alternatives to the traditional mitigation measures for the sites.
Director Lee?
I'd also like to add that the department does have a policy supporting supplemental environmental projects where we've taken enforcement action, and the person or company who is found responsible for the violations is required to pay penalties and may, with our approval, conduct a supplemental environmental project in lieu of up to 50% of a penalty that might otherwise be due. So if there are communities that would like to have investigations or cleanup work done at particular sites that aren't otherwise in the queue for work through our site remediation program, they can propose that project to be approved as part of the list of supplemental projects that an entity that has to pay a penalty could then fund in lieu of up to 50% of the penalty. So that is one important mechanism that we have to make funds available to communities for work that they would like to see done. As Mohsen mentioned, we also do support the grants programs operated by the California Environmental Protection Agency. They have an environmental justice small grants program, and along with the other boards, departments, and offices within Cal EPA, DTSC provides support for those small grants. And we do also help in the screening of applications for those grants, and information about the environmental justice small grants is available on the website that was on the last slide that was presented as part of that presentation. Anna, did you have anything you wanted to add?
I'll add something as well. Thank you, Ingrid, for the question. And adding on to what Mohsen was sharing earlier, we are very thankful that a number of community stakeholders, representatives came around over the past 6 to 8 months to have a dialogue about how the state manages contaminated soil, and also learn more about the current decision-making process for site remediation, for taking a look at when we're proposing a plan, where community input is accepted, and how the department responds to and incorporates while following all the state and federal requirements that we have. So I think that the question was around incentivization for site remediation technologies. We are very much looking into how to make sure that in the decision-making process, we are very clear in incorporating community feedback, better assessing community acceptance as a criteria, and looking at all of the policy and also process tools we have to make sure that there's better communication and we're incorporating feedback as much as possible. So that's an ongoing discussion. I know that a number of stakeholders and community members have put in a lot of time, and we appreciate that. But it is an ongoing discussion on a statewide policy level, and then also at every community we work in. What works best for community members who are near and experiencing the impacts or live near sites where we are undergoing removal actions or remedial action plans. So that's sharing a bit about what we produced as a community dialogue. That was the name of the initiative, and we'll be sharing more also on our website and in some upcoming actions about the outcome of how much information the community members did share with us and what we're doing about that too.
Thank you. That was Ana Mascareñas, who is our Assistant Director for Environmental Justice and Tribal Affairs. Thank you, Director Lee, and thank you, Mohsen, for clarifying and adding additional information. Did we get any further questions on the internet? From the internet, great. And then were there any further questions from folks in the room? We have such a shy group today. I wanted just to repeat the website that we were all referring to that was on the last slide of Mohsen's presentation. It's calepa.ca.gov/loans grants. So it's multiple. It's calepa.ca.gov/loans grants. So that's another area where people can look to for further information. That was our last presentation for today. As many of you know, because it's a quarterly meeting, our next meeting will be targeting the last week of September. We did get some feedback from our last meeting asking why we're continuing to meet in Sacramento, which is not readily accessible to folks who don't live or work near Sacramento. The intention of DTSC, because we're a statewide agency, is to have these meetings at different parts of the state so that people who live and work in other parts of California can attend the meetings in person and can ask public comments in person. So for September, and then our last meeting, which will be in December of this year, for 2018, we are looking at other locations where we can have access to the technological support that we need to have the meeting. So for example, the webcasting takes a lot in terms of technical knowledge and having all the information available. And in a moment, I'm going to read all the different people who helped to work on the logistics to put this meeting together, to have the access and ability to have simultaneous Spanish language translation. There's a lot of support that's needed to have this meeting successfully and have it available remotely. So that was the reason why we kept it close to DTSC offices these first two meetings, but we are going to be looking at locations in other parts of the state that can support us technologically so that we can continue to have webcasting and have the information readily accessible to everyone. So such locations might be in Los Angeles, Oakland, Fresno, or Bakersfield. We're willing to consider other places, so we're looking forward to getting your comments back, as I mentioned on the SurveyMonkey that will be circulating, and we are committed to going around the state and making ourselves available in person to all of the stakeholders who we care about, residents, industry, academics, workers, and non-governmental organizations, to name a few. In closing, I just wanted to thank everyone who presented. It was a lot of work that went into it. So Dr. Meredith Williams, Dr. LaBelle, Mr. Nazemi, Mr. Billy Ferguson, thank you so much for your hard work. All the deputy directors who attended today, thank you for being here. And then I wanted to give a quick shout out to a number of people without whom we could not have been successful today. Kim Smith in the executive office, Jason Moore and Patrick Barkley of OEIM. Thank you so much for all your help. Marcus Simpson, Tammy Pickens, Carrie Rasmussen, Veronica Villaseñor, Susie Flowers-William, who worked on a Sunday and a Saturday of public participation, which is my team, Farah Scheidel, Victoria Garsuta, and Gina Roybal of admin, who assisted as well. James Jolson of communications, thank you so much for all your help. And then we have three people who were going to be coordinating our work on Facebook Live: Barbara Zumwalt, Adam Cavallo-Kane, and Gama Ortiz, also of communications. And finally, I owe a huge debt of gratitude to Patrice Bowen, who is the Chief of Public Participation, who really helped to bring this group together and help make the logistics happen for everyone. So Patrice, thank you for all your hard work. I also finally don't want to forget Suze Houghton, who is the Public Participation's Contract Manager and helped to assist with all the translation and interpretation services today. So with that said, now you understand, everybody, how big of a village it takes to make sure that this meeting happens and it's successful, it runs smoothly. We have all the information available, at least in 2 languages. So thank you, everyone. We look forward to seeing you all and hopefully more of you in person in September, and we will get the date and the time and location out as soon as we possibly can. Director Lee, did you have any closing comments?
I would echo the remarks that Geraldine made, thanking all of you who helped to make this a successful quarterly public meeting for DTSC. I want to thank all of you who came to attend the meeting in the room or who have participated online or are interacting with us through Facebook Live. It's important that we're able to have this opportunity for you to learn a little more about what we do and for us to hear your input into how we can do it better. Thank you so much to the entire team, and I look forward to our next meeting.